Hello and welcome back to the channel. I have a simple question for you now. What does this ABS hardbody have in common with this one? The answer is simple. Though they're both Kamtec ABS hardbodies, you can't buy either of them as they are from Kamtec. One has been shortened to suit a wheelbase and the other had been lengthened. That's something you can't really do with lexan bodies, and though lexan bodies are considered tougher and are certainly lighter, I think it's a huge advantage because there's more. The fact that ABS can be cut and then reliably joined back together again opens up all sorts of possibilities. You can create bodies that have never existed. This semi-truck is made from two different bodies, and the same goes for this Austin lorry. I'll show you what I mean. I got this truck for Christmas and I'm going to use it to demonstrate. I'm going to make it a completely different body. Just to clear up any confusion, this is not a WPL, it's much bigger. It's a WL Toys 124301 and it's 1/12 scale rather than 1/16. To make my body, I'll use this ABS Ford Model Y from Kamtec. Now Kamtec do this body in two forms, with the mudguards or without. I need to use the version that does have the mudguards, but unfortunately I don't like the way Keith from Kamtec has modelled the back here. So this is the back from the Kamtec Model Y that comes without mudguards. It's a bit less aggressive the way it pokes out at the back. So I'm going to be using this, although it's narrower. I may have to widen it very slightly. I might get away with it. Before I start cutting up the Ford body, I'll convert the truck itself from toy grade electronics to hobby grade. Upgrading the electronics proved to be easier said than done. This Tamiya TBLE04 ESC was working perfectly when I took it out of my Tamiya Unimog, and when I stuck it in this, it was suddenly irrevocably jammed in forward only mode. I watched the appropriate YouTube videos, did the appropriate things, but nope, it will only go forwards. Luckily, I had another. Then, when I decided to solder some thicker wires to the motor, suddenly it stopped working. I have no idea how it's possible to destroy a simple brushed electric motor by changing the motor leads, but I did it. Luckily, I had another motor. So, it's hobby grade at last. That's good. It means I can get on with my body. If you remember, the plan is to shorten this body and turn it into a pickup cab. So, I'm going to cut it off just behind the A-pillar. And once I've done that, I can see how well this back from a different sort of Model Y body fits it. When I said that I was going to cut the body just behind the A-pillar, I should have said an inch or so behind it, but still the idea is that this would fit in here, something like that. I've cut the back in half because I'm going to have to widen it by about 10mm to make everything line up and fit. Another thing came in the packet with the Ford Model A body. I was a bit puzzled at first until I realised that Kamtec even supply the headlamp bowls for you. You can see here how I've followed the curvature with a series of straight strips to give me a backing surface to which I can glue the styrene I'll use to fill in the dip, as I've done there on the top. And of course the best possible source of material to fill in that strip is a strip cut from the back of the original car. As the two halves of this cab, though both Kamtec Model Ys are from different bucks, there are some very subtle differences in the curvature of the roof. I've tried to compensate for most of that by sanding away material from the one that curves less, but you can see that I've resorted to filler in quite a few places. Let's have a look at the back of the cab. Once again, you just can't be fussy with this sort of build. You have to be generous with the filler where it's needed. I've also mounted the body. I actually find it easier to fill and sand it if it's firmly and rigidly mounted to something so it doesn't wobble around in my hands. So these and these are what's holding it on, with the front two screws going into these holes and the two at the rear going into these two holes. The screws screw into this piece of wood, which is mounted to this bracket, which is mounted to the track chassis by a couple of 3mm stainless bolts. As you can see, the interior of the cab looks dreadful with all the patches I put across it as I piece the thing together. So I'm going to have to do something about that, obviously. I have spent some time wondering what I'm going to do to finish this off. I wanted to think of some way to bring it round and fare it into here. But then when I actually put the body on the chassis, it struck me that this was the only possible site for a filler neck for the fuel tank on either side. Which is wonderful, lovely and easy. Now I just need to put a filler neck on each fuel tank and that will explain this cutout. One thing with building trucks rather than cars is that the trucks stand a lot higher, and if you position your camera quite low it can be very easy to accidentally film through here and see a burst of light which destroys the illusion that we're looking at a truck and makes it obvious that there's just a plastic shell perched on top of a chassis. So to avoid that, I fill in this area here, and I also add a bulkhead between the cab and the hood. Obviously it'll also need some sort of tray to support the battery. Here then are my 3 additions, and I've begun building a battery tray as well. What I have to do now is take a hacksaw and very carefully give this thing an opening hood. It's never easy to do this, but in this case it was the only possible place to put the battery, so it had to be done. So, time to hinge it. And there we have it, a hinged hood. I hinged it using the smallest hinges I could buy on Amazon. I've started work on a fairly basic styrene dashboard. If you remember, I was talking about doing something about this mess that I've made inside by joining all the pieces together. Well, it occurs to me that I can cover most of it with a simple seat back, and to that end I went and did some dumpster diving at the local industrial estate and found this piece of expanded polystyrene. I'm going to carve this into the shape of a seat back. Disaster has struck. I had the body on for the first time bolted up, and I gave it a celebratory lap around the kitchen. I've talked before about how fragile and frail the prop shafts are on these things. Well, I gave it a tiny bit too much throttle and snapped the rear prop. So, to resolve this, I ordered another prop shaft. The problem with these cars is that you can't just unbolt this bit from the shaft that disappears into the axle. It's all one unit, so I had to get creative. I'm in the process of making this hybrid prop shaft. Bolted to the transfer box's outer shaft is this metal prop shaft of the telescoping variety, and bolted to the axle, or emerging from the axle, is this plastic thing. I'm going to join them together using this homemade sleeve cut from a broken garden deck chair. Looking in through the window you can just see the styrofoam seat back. Like the dash, it'll be set aside until I've decided what colour this vehicle's going to be. It's time to think about the back body. Actually, I quite like this one. There's nothing about it that annoys me or would stop me using it again. However, it is a bit too long now. The new cab's a bit longer, so I'll have to take some off the front. And also, these mudguards are a bit too modern for the era that the car represents, so I think I'm going to have to make these rounded rather than squared off. The hybrid prop shaft is very ugly, but it does work. I've made some little mudguards to go on the back of the shortened back box. The trouble is, I don't really like them very much. They're not what I had in mind at all. The trouble is the aperture is 106mm long, and this is much less than half of that. So the neat semicircle I imagined isn't forthcoming. I'm not really happy with these. I think I'm going to have to think of something else. Fortunately, I was able to harvest these from the back end of a Kamtec Cody pickup, a 1950s pickup. So I'm hoping that they'll look a bit better and more in keeping with the front ones. The headlights are going on. I'm just experimenting with the angle and with the exact position. I hope these fender flares don't turn out to be too wide. Still, what I'm going to do now is give everything a coat of grey primer, put it all together and see how it looks. And they do still seem awfully big for this truck. Good news, I've decided on a colour. This truck and the bed are going to be maroon. So now that I know that, I can get the headlights sorted out so they're looking at the ground and get on with masking this, ready to spray it. Okay, this is the colour. This piece is from an MN45 Toyota Land Cruiser of the same scale. It just happens to fit perfectly. There's one other change I've made to the back body. I've panelled the outside in wood. Well, when I say wood, I really mean bamboo lollipop sticks. Next on the list are headlamp reflectors, rims and lenses, backlights, turn signals, a license plate, door handles, and lastly some sort of driver figure and steering wheel. Oh, and the dash! I'd also like to turn this broken keychain into a tow hook. I've painted the dashboard and the seat back, as well as the grille. I mentioned before that I wanted to make a tow hitch from a broken keychain which my wife saved for me. There it is. It's simply bolted to this piece of angle aluminium which is in turn bolted to the chassis. I've also glazed the front and back windows as well as the headlamps, and I've glued into place these bamboo cocktail sticks which will serve as my radiator grille. I've made a floor for the cab and painted the fuel tanks to match the body colour, and I've finished off the grille. It's by no means perfect, but in my defence all I can say is that this is a model of an old lorry. The spacer to push the seat back slightly forward to make the driver more visible has gone in, and we're looking at making the bench seat that the driver sits on. Well, he's cable tied to it, to be honest. But I can't do that till I've glazed the side windows. With the spacer and the seat back fitted, I was able to go ahead and put the driver figure in. There he is, and thanks to my spacer he's more visible. He's not skulking in the very back of the cab as my drivers have done up till now. I'm not setting out to build a shelf queen. I don't want to be afraid to drive the thing, so I won't be adding mirrors and windscreen wipers and all those fiddly details that just get knocked off with crawlers. And that's why in the end I decided not to go for a wrecker, by the way. The jibs are just so vulnerable that you end up frightened to drive them. The chassis is done. Back body, done. Door handles, done. The latching mechanism for the hood is this magnet, done. These are the wheels I've got for it. Let's put it all together and see it as one finished unit for the first time. It's finished. Let's see it out on the trail. Morning, Sheila. I picked up your stuff this morning and I've dropped it off just back up the road a bit, where you've got your saw bench.
Thank you, that's lovely. Thanks a lot, Rob. I don't suppose you could do me one more favour, could you? And run the tractor spares up to Dave? It's just those 2 boxes there.
Yeah, sure, that's fine. I'll take them up there now, actually.
Thanks, Rob. You're an absolute lifesaver. Toodle bit.
All right, Rob.
Hello, Dave. I've got your tractor parts here.
You haven't. Oh, you're a bleeding star. I've been struggling with this bitch all morning.
Do you need a hand fitting them?
Nah, it's a one-man job, mate. Bloody grateful, though. Nah, you get on, I'll be all right.
OK, mate. I made this video to demonstrate that you really can cut and shut ABS hard bodies pretty much to the extent that you want and create whatever you'd like to see. I hope I've been successful. Thanks a lot for watching.